In our last episode, the pet detectives solved the lobster fishing mystery in Fish Stick, Maine, while little Thomas and Ruger met up with Jack and Ollie, the Australian boomerang makers. During their flight back from Fish Stick, Maine, the pilot was radioed by Polly Opossum from the pet detective headquarters. Polly had been contacted by a hunting and camping lodge in northern Canada, and they have some hikers who have gone missing, and they are in desperate need of the services of the ever-popular pet detectives. Luckily, the pet detectives packed all their winter gear since they were in Maine and agreed to have the flight diverted to the little township of Moose Bacon in northern territories of Canada. Pepe yelled out, "Moose Bacon? Sounds like paradise to me!" Pepe already decided that the hikers got lost on purpose so they wouldn't have to return back to their homes in Brussels Spout, Arkansas, where bacon is probably outlawed. Now all this is just Pepe spouting off. Math and facts have always been something he tries to never use in any of his logic or lack thereof. Regardless, the captain, Amelia Sassypaws, is an expert pilot and was named Amelia because of her adventurous spirit. Amelia said, yes, there's enough fuel to reach Moose Bacon, and it will be way past midnight before they get there. So Charlie volunteered to co-pilot for safety's sake. Across the flat plains of the Midwest, over the Rocky Mountains, then north to Moose Bacon in the Northwest Territories. Late that night, while approaching Moose Bacon Airport, Amelia pointed out that the northern lights, the Aurora Borealis, were visible that night. They all peered out the windows in awe at the magnetic marvel. "What is it?" they asked, and Pepe answered, like Pepe always does. "Well, it's a mystery of nature, only in theory of its actual origin, a mystery to mankind, really. Kind of like Taco Heaven's mystery sauce. You're not sure what it is, only that it's beautiful." Pepe is great at almost making sense out of nonsense, and he's proud of it. After they landed, the team were picked up and driven to the main camping lodge by Benjamin Yebetterduck. It's not his real family name. You see, everyone in his family is over 7 foot tall, and when they walk into a room, everyone says, "You better duck." So they just adopted the name. Now Benjamin filled the team in on all the details on the drive to the camping lodge. The main lodge is located just outside of a little village of Moose Bacon in the remote valley. The first thing the team noticed, that's a beautiful spot, but it is remote and rugged. This is going to be a challenge. Colonel jumped right in and said, "Maps! Maps! I need maps, and more the better." Little Colonel stayed up all night studying the maps of the 20,000-acre camping lodge and the surrounding areas, while the rest of the team called it a day and turned in for the night. Colonel had slept on the plane from Maine, so he was well rested. Oh, now where's little Thomas and Ruger? Well, little Thomas and Ruger are on their way home from the animal shelter when they decided to stop by the apple orchard and pick a few fresh apples for their mom and dad. When they got there, no one was around, so Thomas and Ruger went up to the farmer's house to see if anyone was home. They knocked on the door, and the old farmer and his wife came out. Thomas asked, "Where is everyone? I thought it was apple picking time this time of year." The farmer is known as Grandpa Smith, and his wife is known as, yeah, you guessed it, Granny Smith. Grandpa Smith said that his workers who were going to harvest the apples are lost while they were hiking in Canada. Now Thomas and Ruger are raised to help people in need. Both said, "Well, we'll be your harvest picking crew." "I know there are only 2 of us, but we'll do our best." Farmer Smith said, "Well, let me show you my equipment." Now Farmer Smith is a very resourceful guy, and he has all kinds of different equipment that is not normally used to harvest apples. So he had his semi-truck and trailer at the end of the field just ready to be loaded, but no workers to load it. But Thomas said, "Boy, we're going to need a lot more helping hands." And Ruger said, "Or paws." "Oh yeah," said Thomas, and they told Mr. Smith they'll be right back. So Ruger and Thomas jumped in the pickup and Ruger drove. Because Ruger has his driver's license, Thomas is still working on his as of yet. But Ruger drove him straight back to the animal shelter where they had all their new friends. Thomas and Ruger explained to all the dogs and cats the situation Mr. and Mrs. Smith are in, and with the apple harvest, and the group in the animal shelter said, "Sign us up, we're ready to help." Then all the dogs and cats loaded up in the back of the pickup, with Ruger driving a new apple picking crew to the short drive back to the Smith apple farm. Now Thomas had been thinking on how he can do his best job by using everyone's best talents. So Thomas said to Mr. Smith, "We won't be needing your ladders." "You won't?" Mr. Smith asked. "No, sir," said Thomas. "I have the best climbers in the country. Cats!" Now cats would scamper right up one tree at a time and start stripping the tree bare of its apples and dropping the short distance below to the dogs who held the blankets out just like a trampoline. Softly catching the apples, they would put them into the loader bucket, and then Ruger would dump them into the big truck at the end of the field. Ruger was driving the loader, but Thomas noticed that Tripod, the three-legged dog, couldn't do things the other dogs were doing, and he was feeling left out. So Thomas said, "Hey Tripod, can you drive a loader?" Tripod said, "Yes, he can." So Thomas said, "Hey, could you give Ruger a break and drive the loader? I have other things I need Ruger to be doing right now." Tripod said, "Yes, sir." He was very proud, and he took over on the tractor for Ruger. Now the group were working like a well-oiled machine. Tripod would gently dump the apples in the back of the truck so they wouldn't be bruised, and by the end of the day, the whole Smith apple farm was picked and loaded on the truck. Tripod was right at home operating all the farm equipment, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith asked, "How can we ever repay you?" Thomas just asked, "Can they come out in your fields and play and have our boomerang exercise classes a couple times a week?" "Well, absolutely," they said, and soon the Smiths would go get the shelter animals and play with them all by themselves. And Mrs. Smith, well, she never let Tripod go back. She fell in love with him, and he got his forever home. Good job, Thomas and Ruger. Meanwhile, back at Moose Bacon Camping Lodge, Pepe was the first one up and at the breakfast table, and he ordered moose bacon with a side of moose bacon. The waiter said, we are almost all out of moose bacon." "What?" And then he said, "I feel faint." And the waiter explained that moose bacon was kind of a joke, and it was just a name they came up on a contest. "But we'll have plenty of moose bacon by supper time." Well, Pepe said moose bacon is not a thing to joke about, and that he'll be back for supper, and he is still 3 hours ahead on Eastern Standard Time, so be respectful of that, and he has a medical condition that requires his bacon levels to be up and steady, otherwise he gets grumpy. My, we'd never forgive ourselves if that happened," said the waiter. Pepe was feeling pretty smug and thinking he made his point, and he never caught on to the waiter's sarcasm. It went right over his head. Regardless of Pepe's bacon issues, the pet detective team were all up now, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to find the lost hikers. They all met at the huge dining room at the big log cabin, and Colonel was giving a complete detailed PowerPoint presentation on all the trails of the 20,000 acres of the camping lodge. And there are 4 hikers altogether, and they are in very good shape. It appears they work as apple harvesters, and they were on vacation before the apple season started. Also, they just missed a large snowstorm that came in right after the apple picking hiking crew went out on their hike. After our team put on their winter clothes to ready themselves to go out and track the hikers down. You Better Duck said, "Hey, there's an area on Bacon Creek upstream a while, about a mile from here, and that's where most of the local bears hibernate, so keep your eyes and ears open." Also, the camping lodge had some snowmobiles that our team could pair up and ride. And You Better Duck packed the snowmobiles with equipment, first aid kits, two-way radios, and the team loaded up, and Pepe said, "Let's ride!" He couldn't resist. They headed due north from the lodge, through the frozen tundra of Moose Bacon Valley. Since the last big storm that followed the apple-picking hikers, the fresh snow covered all their tracks. But the pet detectives have a secret weapon, the French Brittany Spaniel Charlie, with his super sensitive nose. Now Charlie didn't need a piece of the apple pickers' clothing, because not only are they apple pickers, They love eating apples, and in their backpacks they are full of Granny Smith apples. Charlie likes apples, but he's more partial to mangoes. So Charlie and Bailey were in front of the pack, with Bailey driving so Charlie could smell and point in the direction his nose was telling them to go. The boys, Samuel and Isaac, stayed off to the left, scanning the forest for possible clues. Isaac had on his prescription snow goggles. As he stood on the back of the seat, scanning back and forth, looking for clues, while Samuel drove. Now Isaac and Samuel were excellent at spotting anything out of the ordinary. Little Colonel and Pepe rode off to the right doing the same thing. But they were relying on Charlie's ultra-sensitive nose and Little Colonel's maps. Charlie can get us there, but Colonel will get him back. Soon after tracking over a mile into the deep snow, Charlie said, "I smell something else." "Moose bacon," Pepe said, hopefully. "No, I'm not sure, but Samuel and Isaac said, that's bear you're smelling. A scent that's strong enough for all to smell." They followed the smell of the bear and apples and directly to a cave on Moose Bear Creek. Charlie said, "I think they're in there." "Oh no, I'm not going in there," said Pepe. But Bailey said, "You know, they have radios from the lodge just like we do." So Charlie got his radio and just tapped the talk button and to make the static noise so he could hear the static noise in the cave. And the hikers radioed back and said, "Help! They are in the bear cave." But so are the bears that are hibernating for the winter and should be waking up any day now. And the boys, Samuel and Isaac, said the bears, when they wake up, they're mean and hungry. Now how are we going to get the hikers out of that bear cave? Let's see what You Better Duck packed for us. They had a lot of stuff, but nothing would help until the last thing they unpacked was one of You Better Duck's big brown fur coats. And it's huge. Now it didn't take long for our team to come up with a plan. They decided to use the fur coat as a bear costume and sneak into the cave and bring the hikers out quietly to safety. But who's going to do it? Well, Charlie sheepishly said, "My mommy always calls me Charlie Bear, but I'm not big enough." So they came up with a plan. Charlie would stand on Samuel and Isaac's shoulders, and they would wear the huge fur coat and just walk in. So Charlie stood on Samuel and Isaac's shoulders, and they put on the big brown fur coat, and they started walking towards the cave. At first they weaved back and forth and side to side. Samuel and Isaac, the twin red foxes, are very good at doing things together, and by the time they reached the cave, they looked like a bear walking on his hind feet. Charlie asked the boys, "What do I say if a bear wakes up?" They replied, "Nothing. But if you say anything, just grumble. But never say a word, only grumble." They walked into the cave, and it was a very large cave. It was long, too, filled with sleeping bears. After Charlie's eyes adjusted to the dark, he could see that the very scared hikers were hiding at the very back of the cave. The boys could too. They could peek out of the huge coat. And right then one of the bears woke up and said, "What are you doing up? And why do you have 4 orange feet?" Charlie just grumbled, and the boys kept on walking. And then the bears just got tired and he dozed back off. Charlie whispered to the hikers not to worry, and if they would all hide behind him and the boys in their costume, they'll walk right out to the snowmobiles and get back to the lodge. The hikers were scared, but happy help had finally shown up. They all slowly walked out of the cave and got to the edge, and Pepe yelled, "Hurry up! I'll be late for my moose bacon supper." The one thing that wakes bears up from hibernation are 2 words: moose bacon. The bears in unison woke up and said, "Moose bacon!" Charlie said, "Run!" to the snowmobiles. When Bailey saw the hikers in the bear costume running towards them, she started all the snowmobiles up, and everyone leaped onto the sleds, and they were off as fast as the snowmobiles would take them. The bears quickly gave up their chase and went back to sleep into the cave. Well, the hikers and the team made it back to the Moose Bacon Lodge for supper, and they had moose bacon stew that warmed everyone as they sat around the large table by the huge fireplace. Pepe said, "Hikers saved? Check. Bear is asleep? Check. Moose bacon stew? Double check. The Pet Detectives once again have saved the day, and they feel great just to be able to help anyone in need. Now Charlie says, whoa, hit that like and subscribe button. Just don't stand there, move around a little bit. And Colonel says, well, ring that notification bell, share this with a friend, share it with somebody you don't like too. Also, he's reading all the comments and taking notes. So we'll see you next time on the adventures of the Pet Detectives.